Welcome back to Good Law, Bad Law. Today begins a series of episodes on the program focusing on the COVID epidemic and the impact on varying systems, institutions of our legal system, of our system of law in this country. And to start us off, my guest today, I'm very pleased and honored to have on the Chancellor of the Bar of Philadelphia, former Judge Michael Snyder. Philadelphia has the oldest bar association in the country, and Mike and I discuss the impact of the lockdown and all of the social distancing and remote work restrictions that we continue to labor under, the impact on our court system, the impact on lawyers and law firms, and of course, most importantly, the impact on our clients who we represent in our court system. Really important and obviously timely and informative episode. My conversation with Philadelphia Bar Association Chancellor Mike Snyder. Stay tuned. Just a few minutes ago, I received a copy of an order from the Pennsylvania Supreme Court extending the closing of the courts throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, except for very limited essential functions, through the end of May until June 1st. The lockdown, the stay-at-home orders that we're facing here in Pennsylvania and so many millions of others are around the country have affected so many sectors of our economy. And the legal industry, the law industry, and the legal community is no exception. My guest today knows something about our legal community here in Philadelphia. He is essentially the mayor of all the lawyers in Philadelphia, as the chancellor of the bar here in Philadelphia. My guest, Judge Michael Snyder. Mike, thank you so much for being on the program today.
Well, Aaron, thank you. It's a pleasure to be on. I appreciate so much being asked and having a chance to talk with you.
Well, and I do appreciate it too. Of course, I talk to a lot of lawyers and I talk to a lot of my clients, and we have many questions and concerns about the impact of this pandemic and the lockdown rules and regulations that we're all subject to still, and that so many others are across the country. This is something that affects not only lawyers, but our entire legal system itself, judges, lawyers, clients, all pending cases in the courts and more. So I thank you for being on the podcast so we can talk about how the pandemic has already affected the legal community and the legal system, our system of justice and courts, and also to talk some about where do we think things are going. Obviously, many people are starting to ask seriously, what will it take in order for us to reopen varying sectors of our economy? And I have a lot of questions about that as affects our legal community. And thirdly, I thought we could also perhaps talk about some of the ways in which the practice of law and the conduct of legal affairs in our legal system, not only ways that it has already changed, but ways in which those changes may become permanent changes for better and for worse. So that's kind of my agenda today, and you are ideally situated to help us understand that, again, not only as far as Philadelphia itself, but more broadly, how this is affecting our legal system around the country. So I appreciate it very much. Mike, perhaps you could give us a little background on yourself and lead us into this with a little background on what it means to be Chancellor of the Bar.
Well, basic background about myself. I grew up in Philadelphia. I'm a product of the Philadelphia public school system, Central High School graduate, of course, the absolute best high school in the nation. No particular pride or prejudice there.
I'm sure.
I went to college in Allentown, to Muhlenberg College, a wonderful small liberal arts school, and then came back to Philadelphia for law school.
And that was at what we now call the Beasley School of Law at Temple
Right.
University, right?
Exactly, exactly. It was Temple University School of Law when I was there, and quite honestly, I teach at Temple Law School now as an adjunct, and I have never yet heard a student calling it the Beasley School of Law, but that's fine.
Right.
It,
Well, and for those who don't know,
Beasley,
Jim
yeah,
Beasley was one of the great
yeah.
Philadelphia trial lawyers of his time.
He was legendary and well deservedly so.
Absolutely.
He could spin a tale, a story of a complex case, and have a jury understand every single aspect of it. He was a master at his craft.
Great trial lawyer. And of course, Philadelphia is known for its trial lawyers, and I'm proud to be a Philadelphia trial lawyer in that great tradition too. Um, and you worked for a number of years as a judge, as a workers' comp judge.
I did.
Uh,
Before that, I was a litigator. Uh,
mhm.
before that, so I litigated cases on both sides, whether plaintiff or defendant, uh, mostly complicated personal injury cases, labor cases as well,
Mhm.
and corporate and contract cases. And then went on the bench for 15 years. I left the bench in 2012 with the idea of being able to do what I do now, which is that I am a mediator engaged in private mediation, private arbitration. I am with the Dispute Resolution Institute, which was the first of really in Philadelphia of private mediation and arbitration services.
And
And
we've seen the tremendous growth of what we call alternative dispute resolution, private mediation, arbitration over, I don't know, the last 15, 20 years or so.
yeah,
And I want to come back to that because I think that's an area where already, as we're coping with the limitations on access to our courts, we're seeing some pretty interesting changes in the way cases can still be resolved
no,
using
absolutely.
technology. And I know you and I chatted about that yesterday, but I want to come back to that.
Okay.
Tell us what it means to be Chancellor of the Bar. That's an important position in any legal community, and of course, Philadelphia has quite a substantial legal community. So
Right.
what does that involve exactly?
Well, first of all, as you know, of course, Aaron, I don't know if all of your listeners do, the Philadelphia Bar Association is the nation's oldest metropolitan bar association.
Hmm.
It was started in 1802, uh, and really not long after our nation became a nation. As Chancellor of the Philadelphia Bar, I have the honor of leading 10,000 members. It is, to me, probably the most amazing gift that I could ever be given, other than the gift of grandchildren. And it is, I consider every day that I can have the title of being Chancellor to be an honor and a joy.
Hmm.
Uh, it is, it is a very different, of course, time now with everything that we are seeing around us with the pandemic than I think most chancellors anticipated or expected. But the challenges are still there. The opportunities to create engagement, to provide leadership are there. And I'm just delighted every day that I can have an opportunity to speak to people and talk about some of the things that we do.
Have you been in touch? Have you been able to be in touch with chancellors in other parts of the country to compare notes and talk about some of the changes that are being imposed on us, and how, as a legal community, on behalf of our clients and on behalf of the court system itself, we have to adapt to these times that we're in. Is that part of what you do as chancellor?
It is. I've had discussions with different leaders elsewhere. The National Association, National Conference of Bar Presidents, through the American Bar Association, provides an opportunity for us to communicate, to meet. Coincidentally, right before the pandemic really started in the United States. I had been in Austin, Texas for an annual meeting of the National Conference of Bar Presidents. So it was a great opportunity to talk to other bar presidents and to discuss with them challenges and ways of meeting them and changes. Of course, at that time, we weren't really talking about the nature of what we see going around us now, but law is always an evolving profession, and these conversations are always worthwhile.
Hmm. Okay, so well, as I mentioned, this Supreme Court order that came out earlier today. We're recording this conversation on Tuesday. It'll air in just a couple of days from now. No surprise there that the court has extended the lockdown on any public functions in the courthouse, in the courthouses of Pennsylvania through the end of May. Always a little disconcerting when we finally see that extension actually announced, because all of us, of course, are eager to get back to work in the fullest sense. But what do you make of where we are now, the state of our courts and the state of what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do? And give us, sort of an overview assessment from where you sit of where things stand right now.
Well, I think that where things stand right now is in many ways a moving target. Uh, the court is working continuously to try and craft structures that will allow for the business of the courts to proceed. And those structures are complicated.
Hmm.
They are not always able to be effectuated as quickly as the court or as the lawyers would like. But the overall concern, of course, is to provide for the safety of both the judiciary as well as the bar, as well as the public. And unlike other municipalities that have a much smaller court presence, we have our courts situated both in the criminal justice center and in the family courts, as well as those courts that are in City Hall. So the structure is enormous. It is quite difficult, particularly in a building like City Hall, to be able to have people as separate and distant as safety and the governor would allow. One moment, please. I apologize.
Yeah,
So those are challenges.
yeah.
Lawyers are, as you know, used to learning how to be creative to rise to the level of a challenge. And I'm confident that our Philadelphia bar, uh, being composed of Philadelphia lawyers in the fullest sense of the word, will meet these challenges. Um,
Well,
one of the things that is, of course, the biggest issue for us in Philadelphia is with a structure as old as City Hall is, come limitations of infrastructure as well.
mhm.
So that's another aspect of it. But I've had numerous conversations with Judge Fox and with some of the other administrative and supervising judges, and I believe that they are doing everything humanly possible that they can do as quickly as they're able to do so.
Yeah. Well, right. I mean, I think we have to kind of think about things in, as we often hear discussed, uh, whether it's on the from our national leaders or our state leaders, in phases. So we're still in the phase right now where uh, things really have to largely be shut down. And our governor, Governor Wolf, to his credit, I think, was very uh, timely in shutting down all but the most essential functions of our state economy, and that includes our courts and our legal system.
I
You know,
agree.
Right now, we can't really do anything in public. I mean, we're not going to have, for example, jury trials. We're not going to have lawyers appearing before a judge in a courtroom now, and certainly not anytime before the 1st of June, per this order that just came out today from our
That's
Supreme
correct.
Court. There's no way, even if you had a brand new courthouse, there's no way you're going to put, for instance, 8 or 12 jurors in a jury box, or 70 jurors in a large room for jury selection. There's just no way possible to do that,
But
and maintain safety during what still is the height of this pandemic in terms of risks of exposure. And I think that has to be what's behind, the central point of the Supreme Court's order, and these are
exactly.
paralleled in states all over the country as well.
Yeah,
But there
yeah,
are certain things that, and you said it correctly, our legal system is very complex. People probably think most easily about trials, because that's what we see on television, that's what we see in TV shows and all. But there are a lot of functions of the court before we ever get to trial. And some of those are deemed essential, and therefore the courts are continuing with some of those functions. And some of them, uh, I think we're going to see starting to open up more and more in the weeks ahead. Can you give us some sense of what are some of the things that even right now, when the restrictions are the most severe, are deemed essential and therefore must continue, versus other things that are, uh, really being put on a back burner for the time being?
well, obviously, domestic relations matters involving the family, custody, the safety of individuals through Protection from Abuse Act matters, orders like that. Those are clearly essential. They are essential to protect the safety of the public, the safety of families. They're essential to provide some degree of sanity when families are in dissolution.
Hmm.
That's one thing. I think another thing, of course, that is essential are elements of the criminal justice system.
Right.
And there are aspects of matters that relate to specific deadlines, for instance, probate and trust matters, that still are essential. We may have social distancing, but one does need to raise an estate. There need to be certain things that need to happen. Uh,
Hmm.
Civil litigation, there are many, many aspects of it that are essential. The the biggest issue in civil litigation is that if you are not able to have a trial, that doesn't mean that attorneys don't file motions. It doesn't mean that attorneys are sitting back at home watching TV. They have things
Right.
that they have to do to represent their clients. So that may involve discovery motions. It may involve replying and responding to case management conferences, different things like that. And so it is so much a moving target that it really is hard to pin it down to say that one specific aspect is not essential.
Well, right. And I thought one of the things that I noted in the Supreme Court order that came out today that I was actually
Yeah.
pleased to see was something that we've seen come out from individual courts around Pennsylvania over these last couple of weeks, which is something of an admonishment by the Supreme Court that parties to litigation and their lawyers should not use the pandemic as an excuse to be, in the language of the court, dilatory. We should not
That,
uh, say, "Well, I can't do anything on the case at all. I must watch the latest episode of my favorite show instead." The court is saying there are things you can do.
absolutely.
You can take depositions of witnesses. Except for somebody, say, a healthcare provider who is substantially involved in treating patients in this COVID epidemic, um, you can take depositions. You can, as you say, file motions. You can exchange documents in discovery. I
Correct.
mean, we should, as lawyers, on behalf of our clients and their interests and their cases, be moving cases. We should be doing our work and our job and our ethical duties to do those things that we can do, even if we can't appear publicly in court right now.
Yes, because the the thing that I think needs to be remembered is we are, of course, the service profession. Uh, our our jobs, our profession, our careers depend on us being able to meet the needs of clients, the needs of the public, and to serve them appropriately. So that may mean that we have to figure out ways of using modern communication methods to do so. But major pieces of litigation, major aspects of daily life don't go away merely because we are unfortunately in the middle of a pandemic. The
Mm-hmm.
problems still exist. To ignore the problems or to freeze things in place only makes the problems worse in many cases.
Well, still speaking of this immediate period that we're in, and it's now been a number of weeks. Um, I think from the people that I talk to, people are settling into remote working because we can't even really be in our offices right now. Uh,
Correct.
we have to work remotely. That raises challenges for how we communicate with one another within a firm and how we communicate with our clients and with lawyers on the other side of our cases. But it can be done. Um, but there, Mike, there are some really pressing uh, burdens and pressures on the legal community right now, just as there are in many other sectors of our economy. I have heard and seen reports of lawyers in small law firms facing tough decisions about laying off their staff, trying to get access to some of the money that Congress, at least for a brief time, made available to support small businesses with loans. Uh,
Absolutely.
Lawyers in big firms experiencing layoffs of staff,
Mhm.
seeing their salaries or their partner draws cut substantially.
Yep.
I mean, going a month or 2 months with zero or very limited revenue for any business, and lawyers and law firms are no exception. That is a very serious blow. What do you understand? Both in Philadelphia and more broadly speaking, about the impact of this on the legal community, the economic impact of this on the legal community.
Well, I think that, Aaron, you've really hit the nail on the head that there are so many different aspects of the practice of law and the business of law, because law is also a business. There has to be revenue coming in to be able to pay staff. If the revenue isn't there because you can't service a client, you may have to lay off staff. There are job offers for young law graduates or for summer associates that may have to be withdrawn or deferred. There is the fact that although you may not be able to be in your physical office, there is no bank that is saying, or landlord that's saying, you don't have to pay your rent.
Right. That's
And you
true.
have obligations to staff where you cannot say to people who may not even be in the anywhere near the economic structure that we assume that lawyers are, that you're just going to do without a paycheck for a month or 2 months or 3 months or 4 months. We don't know how long. That's untenable.
Right.
So, and obviously, because of the high concentration of staff in law firms, think of how broadly the effects of law firm closures resonate within the society. So it's the lawyers, it's their families, it's the staff and families, it's kids that need school tuition being paid or college tuition, car payments, all these different things. Uh, and the expenses keep coming. And I think that this is a dramatically unsettling time for every lawyer and for everyone that is managing a law firm, having to keep a firm afloat.
Absolutely. I mean, I have to say, I mean, on a personal note, I feel really blessed because, uh, y- you know, we are a boutique. We're a trial firm. Most of the people who work with me have worked with me for many years. We're like a family, and I have committed that I'm going to do everything within my power to make sure we stay together. And thankfully, we're doing well, and we're
Mm.
able to move cases and keep busy and uh, keep us together. But I know that others are struggling.
Mm.
You just you just look out your window and imagine all the businesses out there within a mile of you, say, and you just
Correct.
know that so many people have lost their jobs. Hopefully, it's temporary, but for some, it may become permanent. And I think that that has to be a real concern in the legal community as well.
Very much so.
And
I,
it's tragic.
it is. And I think that lawyers, particularly and judges, in many ways see themselves as being the custodians of society.
Yeah.
Uh, Many of the things that we as lawyers and judges do reflect on whether our society continues to exist as we know it. Uh, that we know we have a responsibility to a community, particularly to a community that may not have the resources, financial or otherwise, to survive without the assistance of the legal profession.
Well, yeah. I mean, of course, everybody has to be very concerned about their individual livelihood, their family, uh, and perhaps your community, if you're community minded, and I hope everyone is. But lawyers uniquely, I think, have uh, also a set of ethical obligations that
Absolutely.
require us. We ought to be. We hopefully take those ethical responsibilities very seriously. I worry about myself, of course. I worry about my staff, members of my firm, and my clients. You know,
Absolutely.
it is a whole legal system that that is feeling the effects of this. And we can't function as a society, as a democracy, as a country, as an economy without our legal system. Uh,
Absolutely.
right. So when that is impacted as dramatically as it is, that affects a lot of people and in some ways a way of life. And so the concerns about where, how this is going, how we're going to come out of this, and when we're going to come out of this, uh, raise, I think, pretty profound questions about how we will function in this case as a city, as a commonwealth, as a
Yeah.
country. I mean, how do you feel today? Do you feel optimistic? Do you feel worried? Do you feel hopeful? How would you describe what you see as far as where we've come in the last many weeks, and where you think we might be going in that regard?
Well, let's let's start with the fact that I am basically a cautious optimist.
Mm.
I I believe that if we work to try and do the right things, that we will come out of that which challenges us stronger. And that's one of the things that I know I'm trying to express in messages that I deliver to members of the association and to the public. Uh, there's no question these are horrible challenges, but the challenges are not going to go away. We need to learn how to survive and adapt with the challenges. We have to hope that at some point the challenges will, if not disappear, that they will lessen. But for now, we have an obligation to ourselves, to a community, to rise above the challenges. I think the thing that is troubling for so many of us is that we don't have a clear sense as to how long this level of social isolation, of limiting of society will go on. And I think that what one hears is that some people are saying, well, we're okay for now. We're getting through this, but ask us in 6 months if we're still doing it, how we're going to be.
Absolutely.
And
I mean,
yeah,
6 months
God
is a
forbid.
long time,
Yeah,
right?
it is. And none of us can answer those questions,
Yeah.
but I think that what is important is trying to maintain a positive attitude,
Right.
trying to find ways to skirt around the problem, to make a bad situation better, and to find ways to, I think, very importantly, keep everybody's spirits up emotionally, to give them a sense that there is a reason for hope and that there are things that you can do that can make life better for you and for others. So that's kind of where I'm inclined to be.
Hmm. Well, uh, one of the things that I worry about is, of course, we all imagine that the scientific community is working around the clock to develop the tests, to develop the treatments, to develop the vaccines that are really going to ultimately put an end to this. Um, but I don't think anybody kids themselves that that's going to be something we're going to see in the next day or so, or in the next week or so. It's going to take some time. Um,
Absolutely.
so we're going to have to adapt. We're going and we're already doing so. And so, what are some of the things that you think or are already seeing that will allow us to adapt? Because I worry that there's a misconception generally that there will just come a moment when this very, very long red light will turn green and we could just go again. You know, it's
Yeah.
just not going to be that way.
No,
I mean, do you agree? I mean, we're going to have to be adapting to this for some time.
I agree. And I think that not only will we have to be adapting to it for some time, but we may have to reach an understanding that some of the adaptations that we make are likely to become permanent or very long term rather than just a temporary adaptation.
Right.
So if that's the case, we need to look to the courts for guidance. We need to recognize our role in adapting and in allowing a society to continue. I think that the biggest issue, as I said, is the uncertainty of time, and that we can't even be talking realistically about days or weeks. But as you know, we listen to scientific experts and economic experts who tell us that the effects of this may well last for years. That's a possibility, that the
Hmm.
issues as far as development of a vaccine may take a lot longer than any of us would like to have happen.
Right.
Uh, so those are certainly the challenges. So then the question is, how do we as a profession rise to meet those challenges? What can we do? How can we learn to operate differently so that we can take a naturally competitive spirit, which exists, I think, with attorneys, to be a cooperative spirit that, although still effectively representing clients, but to do so with a cooperative mindset as much as possible.
Well, let's talk specifically about some of those adaptations because I know you and I've chatted and we're already seeing that. Um, I saw a pretty startling piece on CNN a few nights ago. It was a reporter went to Wuhan, this big city in China
Yeah.
where this pandemic really began, and I think the point of the story was, as that city starts to come out from its very long lockdown, you still see people dealing with it in profound ways, wearing masks, having their temperatures taken before they go into a hotel, social distancing as much as is possible. I think most people have already processed the idea that uh, we're going to be covering our faces and uh, buying hand sanitizer anytime we see it on the store shelves for some time to come. But what are some other specific adaptations, particularly with technology, that you're already seeing being put to use that could perhaps become more long-term features of the way our court system and the practice of law function going forward?
Well, I think that one of the things that is likely to have more significant usage as we go along is the use of various forms of video conferencing technology.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously now we are all using it all the time, which means that we are putting tremendous burdens on these technological envelopes, which means the likelihood is there are going to be some problems using them, sometimes where perhaps they may not be as reliable. But at the same time, American ingenuity is such that I'm confident that the developers of these platforms will improve upon them, provide increasing bandwidth and providing even more enhancements. I think that we will see attorneys and the courts making more use of certain elements of these technologies on a more long-term, widespread basis, perhaps using technologies such as this for case management conferences, things that do not absolutely require an in-person experience. Do I think, though, that we are likely to see a replacement of the idea of a trial being alive, the currents, be something that goes by the wayside? No.
Mm-hmm.
I think that for anyone who is a litigator, we all recognize, or has been a litigator, we recognize the tremendous degree of communication effectiveness that comes about through that which can only be delivered in an in-person experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I think,
Whether it's
thank goodness too, because
yeah,
I,
absolutely.
I was been thinking about that as you were talking, and it's very easily imaginable to, and I've already had some experience with this, and I know in your mediation practice you've already had some experience with this, video conferencing for settlement conferences, for mediations. I have mediation for next month. It's going to be virtual. It's going to be through
Yeah.
video conferencing, and it actually can be quite effective.
I have been doing them constantly.
Yeah, and particularly where you would otherwise have people coming from distant parts of the country, you can
Correct.
actually there are some efficiencies to video conferencing. Uh, people would have otherwise to pay for travel and hotels and such. Um, Other
You know,
things, other court functions. You mentioned case management conferences, status conferences, even oral arguments on issues before a judge. You could see those being done by video, um, as is already
perhaps. Yeah.
starting to happen. Yeah, but
Yeah.
trials,
Yeah.
I mean, that's something completely different and
I agree. I mean,
unimaginable to think of that being done by.
no, I mean, we've obviously had for many, many years uh, testimony being presented in some limited fashion in trials by videotape. For
That's
instance,
true.
a
That's true.
videotape trial deposition of a doctor or an expert
Hmm.
who is not likely or able to travel in to the jurisdiction where the court is, and therefore their depositions are taken by video. But would I want to see an entire trial that is done that way? The answer is no. As
Well,
I
Mike,
said,
there isn't a lawyer I think you could name who would
no,
ever say,
no.
"I prefer a witness by
Yeah,
video during a trial. It's only
absolutely. I
right.
know.
It's only in the most absolutely necessary situation that you'd voluntarily do that.
Absolutely. You know, I was, as you know, both a litigator and then a
Hmm.
judge. So
Right.
I saw it from both ends of the spectrum.
Hmm.
And there is no part of it that I would say I would be happy with a trial that was all done by video conferencing. I think there
Hmm.
would be too much that would be lost. Uh, I think that the problem as well is that one thing that we are forgetting is that in the event of a jury trial, one needs to keep a jury engaged
Hmm.
in what is going on in the trial. And you know, as a litigator, how hard it is to get a jury to look at a videotape deposition that goes on for 2 hours.
Right.
You you look over at the jury, and invariably you see some of their eyes glazing over, things like that.
Right.
So this, to me, is another part of the picture.
So it could be that trials. Uh, I mean, there could become a backlog of. I mean, think there probably already is a backlog of trials because of uh, the time period that we've had the courts closed already, and that if as that continues, that could become even more of a problem. Do you think so?
I think that it has the potential to be so. Um,
Mhm.
Obviously, if there is a stock of trials that have to be held, and there are only a given number of judges and a given number of courtrooms, one can only try and encourage efficiency to a certain degree before there are no more courtrooms and there are not enough judges.
Mhm.
Uh, so a backlog may develop. Now, the end result may be that there will be more emphasis on settling cases, but is that really very different than anything we have had in recent years, where the cost of trials, the time to get to a trial, are so extensive that we have encouraged settlements more? Uh, Obviously, what I do on a professional basis is the result of a recognition by the bench and the bar that alternative dispute resolution is a valuable way of helping parties to resolve issues in a quicker fashion and in a less expensive fashion
Mhm.
than the cost of a trial or the
Right.
time for a trial.
Well, and that's as you say, that's been true for a long time now, and
Yeah,
many
yeah,
we find many of our cases benefit from mediation uh, once you get to a point where both sides really understand pretty well what the issues are in the case, and
exactly.
the importance of actually going to trial is much less. I mean, really only if the parties are very far apart in how they're valuing a case. Um,
Exactly.
and that happens, and people have a right to a
Yeah,
trial, and so we have
right.
trials.
And
Um,
there were some issues, of course, that demand a trial.
mhm.
There were some issues where the effect not just on the parties, but the downstream effect on other parties or society demand a trial.
Mhm. You could, I think you could. What about appellate trials in our courts of appeals and in the Supreme Court, Mike? That's an area where you could see more uh, virtual arguments because you're really taking the jury out of the process when you're at the
Hmm?
appellate level. What do you think about that?
Well, you're taking the jury out of the process at the appellate level, but now what you're substituting for that is an appellate judge or a panel of judges that are not just reading the briefs and looking at trial transcripts, but they are listening to the argument by the attorneys. And that oral argument is something that provides them much the same experience, albeit on certain different planes, as the jury is provided in a trial.
Hmm.
And would I want to be arguing every case in a recorded vacuum? No, because again, there is that interplay. during argument between the judge or judges or justices and the attorneys for the parties that allows them to pick up on pauses, local cues, context, and question the attorneys and thereby inform themselves more
Right.
and focus the attorneys on the issues that a judge considers appropriate.
Oh, there's no question. I won't name names here, but I'll say that I had an oral argument in an appeals court a number of years ago, and I was really pretty astonished that two of the judges, uh, I guess because there was some issue, they couldn't be there in person, phoned into the argument. And it was a very strange experience being
Yeah,
there in court and knowing that you should be addressing three judges and you're really only addressing one. Two were on the phone.
yeah,
Live is better. It just
it is.
is for a lot of what we do as advocates.
Well,
Uh, so
and the experience that you just talked about, just for me, brings to mind the phrase "Deus ex machina."
help the non-lawyers in the audience understand that one.
God out of a machine, essentially.
Right. All right, I'm going to ask you two questions. I'll tell you what they are before I have you answer, so you know where I'm going. You have described your role as Chancellor of the Bar as allowing you to represent and advocate for and speak to both members of the legal community and also members of the public. So I'm going to ask you the same question, but ask you to address each of those audiences separately. As the Chancellor of the Bar here in Philadelphia, the oldest Metropolitan Bar Association in the country, here we are in the last week of April 2020. What would you like to say? What message would you give at this point in time to first the members of our legal community, and again, not just in Philadelphia, but around the country, and secondly to the public, which obviously has a very powerful, profound interest in the workings of our legal system?
Well, I think that first, as to the members of our profession, to the legal community, what I would say to them is that continue to be ethical, continue to work cooperatively, look to an organization such as the Philadelphia Bar Association to provide you with access to resources that you may not have had, and keep in mind your obligations toward your clients as well as to your community. And wherever we can help as an association, that's what we are anxious to do. And if necessary, challenge us.
Mm,
Tell us what you need so that we can, and that I can, try and help you,
mm,
try and provide solutions and answers and assistance. As to the public, as I said, I think that we as lawyers have a tremendous responsibility to be the guardians of safety for the public. We have an obligation to look out for those who don't have the resources to look out for themselves. That's an obligation that is not going to go away merely because we are practicing social distancing. We have an obligation to keep structures in place that will provide access to justice for all. And that is something that is extraordinarily important to me and to the association. It's been a cornerstone of the association. It's going to be something that we are going to continue to be steadfast with, and that we are going to be the constant defenders of.
Well, and if I may add just a PS and on a personal note to that, and to all, stay strong, stay safe, be well. We're going to get through this. It's going to take strength and courage and resolve, but we will. And to you, and
Absolutely.
you, Mike, to Judge Michael Snyder, my guest, Chancellor of the Bar here in Philadelphia. All the best and health and safety to you and your family. Thank you so much for being on Good Law,
Well,
Bad Law today.
to you also, Aaron, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today. It was a pleasure.
An honor. Pleasure to speak with you, Mike. Thank you.